Good morning. It is Friday, April the 9th. I'm Mike McCauley. This is Market Insights with Mike. And Mallory Vaughn is our producer, editor, and basically our control person for the show. She's always here, and I always appreciate it. We had an interesting week. First off, the news, Prince Philip passed away this morning. He was just 2 months shy of his 100th birthday. It shouldn't affect us as far as the market's concerned. It probably means that the market will be closed maybe 1 day or 2 days in the next 10. And we'll see how that shakes out. With his age, the plans are probably already in place, and it's a matter of announcing them and see how it will be dealt with. It will be interesting to see if the Queen now changes what she does. She's always said that she's going to be there for life, but with Prince Philip passing away, we'll see if that changes anything. I don't expect a whole lot of impact. And you know that we've always talked about, I have talked about the last couple of months about a concern about a recession in the UK. That concern is kind of dwindling. First off, they're starting to reopen. We're starting to see some strength there. So I don't think that the passing of Philip is going to do much at all other than to close their market for maybe 2 trading days. So let's go ahead and get straight into it, Mallory. It is April 9th, 2021, and our FOMC notes for March 16th, 17 meeting. There was a lot in these notes, and I want to touch on some of them. Some of them are just a reiteration of what we've known before. First off, they're again ad nauseum saying they're going to keep interest rates where they are, which is basically 0 to 0.25%. They have an easy policy, what's called an easy policy. They're not using a lot of quivers. They still have a lot that they can use, but they're just very slowly sitting back and trying to steer things easily, like a great big boat across the ocean. They're just making small turns, and they intend on continue doing that. They're going to keep buying $120 billion per month in instruments, and they'll keep doing that, put that on their balance sheet. That helps shores up the fixed income market. They do have a goal of maximum unemployment. We're going to talk about that in a second because the number went up again last week. They have adjusted their stand for inflation, and the change is they used to make adjustments based on what the forecast for inflation is. And on the notes from a couple of weeks ago, what they're saying is they're going to make adjustments based on actual inflation, not the forecast. So instead of being kind of proactive, they're going to be reactive as far as inflation is concerned. That's not a bad thing. And again, the rates are going to be near 0. The other thing that they committed to in the notes is that if they're going to make any changes, they're going to give us advance notice. So we won't be surprised after a meeting, the next meeting, which comes up in June, that they say, surprise, we're raising things 50 basis points. First off, that's not going to happen anyway. But when they do decide to raise, we're going to know ahead of time. It won't be a surprise. The other thing that's pretty good is they've raised the estimate for GDP. They had it set at 4.2 in December. These notes are raising it to 6.5, which is really good news. They're forecasting unemployment to be near 4.5% by the end of the year, and to inflation to be about 2.2%. It's fractionally higher than what their target is, but as we've talked about, they're going to let it run wild so that the average is 2%. So all of these notes actually were reassuring, and I don't see anything happening major. Nothing happened major yesterday. We did have the S&P 500 hit a 52-week high. We'll see how we go today, but none of the indices are having huge moves based on these notes, but they're all reassuring. And then we have our Dow Jones average. If you look over here, you can see that it's been quiet these last couple of days. I don't see any change in that today. When you have the NASDAQ go up 17 points, I'm sorry, the S&P 500 go up 17 points, and the Dow goes up single digits. It's been kind of quiet. I'm not worried about seeing this flat. This is kind of what we're going to call for now taking a breather. So we're all okay. We're still trending upwards. All good news. This is our Treasury yields, and I just use the term taking a break, taking a breather. That's what we're doing here. You can see this climb on the far right-hand side where I'd expressed before concern that we went up awfully fast, and I was uncomfortable with that. So here we are this week where we've stepped back a little bit, and we're going to call that taking a breather. Not a bad thing at all. It's kind of nice to see that. Right now we're looking at 1.68 on the 10-year, which is a fine number for now, and we'll keep an eye on this. But it looks like this is taking a breather as well. Everybody's taking a breath, and we'll see how it goes. You have our sector report, 2021 year to date, that column in the middle. I got to be honest with you, except for telecommunications, these are all pretty exceptional numbers. If you take that and multiply it times 4, that's roughly the annualized return. So these are huge numbers, and we just need to be cautious. We've had a good quarter, and see how it goes. But some of these numbers are just outstanding. I know that we know that oil right now is above $63, $64 a barrel. Telecommunications is solid at 0.5%. And that's interesting because I thought it would be growing a little bit more based on what we've done in the economy, what we need as far as communicating with each other. If you're a This Is Us fan, a couple of weeks ago, they just had a wonderful episode about the guy that created what we now use to talk with each other, and that's all telecommunications. Phenomenal episode if you want to go watch it. So this is where we are on our sectors and how we've done for the quarter, all pretty good. And on the trailing 12, those numbers now are going to start dwindling down because remember, we had that low March 23rd of last year. So you're going to see these trailing 12 numbers start to become what we'll call more prudent man, realistic numbers. And as we go through the weeks, they'll start dwindling down to something that's a little more real. Next, unemployment claims. That popped up again. We also had an adjustment to the week before. So not only do we have 744,000 new filings, we added 16,000 to the previous week. That's not great. However, on the other side of this, we did have 900,000 new jobs created. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that what we're expecting is kind of a change or a revamping of our workforce. And that's not terrible at all. It just means that we're seeing different jobs. We're seeing people go after different jobs. I can tell you that I've got a 16-year-old son that happens to be a computer wizard. We went to buy a computer a couple of weeks ago and took him, and I had no idea what him and the computer guy were talking about. It could have been Klingon to me, but his passion is woodworking. And he brought home a trivet, I think it's called, the other night that was absolutely, it was beautiful. It was artwork. So he gets computers, but what he's choosing to do is something more with his hands, something more artistic. And that's a very simplified version of what I think we might be seeing in the workforce, where people have taken this COVID break and they're saying, this surprised me, this set me back. I think what I want to do with my life is this. And so we're seeing maybe an evolution in the workforce, and jobs are being created in other places where we didn't have them before. So at this point, the 744,000 is a big number, but it's being offset by new jobs to some extent. And we'll see how that goes as everything keeps picking up. We're doing great on our vaccines and see how we're going. So again, the number's a little high. We have to keep watching it. It's slowly whittling down, but sure would like to see it whittle down more. But the new jobs are an exciting piece of it. Mallory, here we have the US Volatility Index. Yesterday, we hit a 52-week low on the Volatility Index. If you've listened to me, you know that I want to see that number at 10. We are, as of last night, 17.3, which is great. And you keep seeing this rolling down. This is a pretty solid future indicator of what's going on. Now, we don't get a lot of lead time on this. When the volatility index kicks up, you typically see that hit the market awfully fast. But for right now, to see that line drifting down and to see us hitting a 52-week daily low is very positive for the economy in general, and something that we really like to see. Then we have our so Monday is International Space Travel Day. It's the anniversary of the first trip into space, which was by Russian Yuri Gagarin, who actually did one orbit and came back. Alan Shepard was the first American that went up. He went up about 6 weeks later, but he just went up and came back down. He was only up for about 15 minutes. But the interesting part about the astronauts, of the first 29, 7 were left-handed, which is an extraordinary percentage. 7 reapplied twice. 2 of them reapplied 3 times. And I'm working on a couple books right now. One of them talks about this and says that this either tells you that they're stubborn or they're committed to what they want to do. Either way is fine. And of the first 29, 22 of them were firstborn, and 6 of those were only children. Those are fascinating statistics. When you talk about somebody's being chose to get in a tin tube on top of it, basically a huge explosion, and right into space. Just interesting set of statistics for what it took to be an astronaut and where they are. 12 men have walked on the moon, that's all, and they did it over a short period of time. So Monday's a pretty cool day for me. It's space travel is fascinating. If you have time, go back and watch John Kennedy's speech at Rice University, which is just an incredible speech. And it's just a great day to think back on what we've done, particularly as a culture when we decided we were going to do this and we were exploring when we went out and did it. That's what Monday's all about. So next, Mallory, this is our calendar, April 12th, International Space Flight. Now, it says nothing to do with it. I think it's coincidental that on April 12th, the day we honor the International Day of Human Spaceflight, the federal budget will also come out. I expect that both of them will be about as high. So we'll see what happens there. On 13th, we see the Consumer Price Index, which is important. That helps us give a key on inflation and how we're going with that. On April 14th, a very important beige book. The significance there is the book is beige, and so in our ever-standing ability to be imaginative, we call it the beige book. That's going to tell us a lot about what's going on as far as the overall economy is concerned. On the 16th is housing starts. I've talked before about we typically see a bump in housing starts in October and April. This is not the April housing starts. This is March. So I don't expect a huge bump on these. I expect it a month from now when we see the April numbers. On April 29th, we see the GDP quarterly numbers are going to be released. That's important. That's going to give us some indication. Are we still, or are we coming out of the recession? I think all of us know we're coming out of it. We're coming out of it pretty solid. And with the forecast of unemployment by the Fed being at 4.5% by the end of the year, I think we all know that the GDP numbers are going to be pretty solid. May 9th, reminding you way ahead of time is Mother's Day. And we'll keep reminding you that so nobody forgets. That pretty much ends it for this week. We have a quiet week coming up. We'll see how England does, and we'll talk about their market next week a little bit. And we're also going to talk next week about the FOMC, what it does, and what other tools they have. Because our feeling is as we go forward through the next couple of months, and as we start dealing with inflation, we're going to start hearing more about the Fed, the FOMC, Jerome Powell and his team, and what they do, what quivers they decide to use to keep the economy where they need it. When what they're looking for is organic growth, growth at a reasonable pace. They want to control inflation, but they know inflation has to exist. So next week, we're going to talk in a little bit more detail about what the FOMC does, why it's there, and what we expect from them. In the meantime, if you have any questions, give us a call, 913-259-2110. We're always here to help. Tell your friends on it. I can look up the board, and I see folks in obviously Kansas, Missouri, North Carolina, Texas, 2 different locations in Texas, Utah. It's great to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're glad to have you here. And we will see you 1 week from today, Friday morning. Thanks very much, folks.